Good morning. Quorum being present. Only 4 minutes late. The Committee on Veterans Affairs will come to order, and we're meeting this morning to mark up 11 bills. There are amendments in the nature of substitute for 7 of these bills that were noticed by the committee. Some of these include the text of other bills that were passed on a bipartisan basis at the subcommittee level. Each of the bills we will consider today will benefit veterans and their families. We are considering legislation that would provide better care for disabled veterans, increase suicide prevention efforts through the TAP and Solid Start program, create a new administration within the VA that focuses solely on veterans' economic opportunities and transition assistance, and increasing accountability in VA, and improve the lives of our veterans. Improve the Edith Nourse Rogers STEM scholarship to make it more accessible to applicants. We're going to clean up the red tape for schools that participate in the GI Bill and make sure veterans receive accurate information when applying to a school, and increase accountability and transparency for both the VA Board of Veterans Appeals and the VA Fiduciary Program. Improve the VA claims and appeals process by building on the accomplishments of the Veterans Appeals Improvement and Modernization Act of 2017, recognizing and increasing access to disability compensation for female service members who served in combat as members of cultural support teams, increasing access to benefits for surviving spouses of veterans and suffering from ALS, and expanding access to disability exams for rural and underserved veterans. Now I'd like to yield, if I can, to the ranking member for his opening remarks.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I plan to speak on individual bills, so I'm happy to proceed to the business of this markup, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member. We would need to, first off, we're going to call up H.R. 522. I now call up H.R. 522, the Deliver for Veterans Act. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R. 522.
Text was circulated in advance and pursuant to committee rules without objection. The first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is now open for amendments at any point. I now recognize myself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk shall report the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute.
I ask unanimous consent that future reading of the amendment in the nature of substitute is dispensed with. I ask that it be considered as base text for the purposes of this markup, and without objection, so ordered. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes to speak in support of the amendment in the nature of a substitute. H.R. 522, as amended, would allow VA to cover the cost of shipping a vehicle that has been modified for disabled veterans back to the owner. This program is essential to ensure disabled veterans have the ability to drive to work, medical appointments, or the grocery store. This is a common sense bill to ensure that once a vehicle is modified to meet a veteran's need, that the vehicle can then be delivered to them. This would rightfully help ease the burden of shipping costs for the disabled veteran across America and into the territories. Lastly, I am pleased that CBO's estimate of the bill was low at roughly $1 million per year, which is offset. I thank DAV and the VFW for supporting the bill. I also want to thank my friend from Guam, Mr. Moreland, for introducing this bill. Do any other members wish to comment on the amendment in the nature of a substitute on H.R. 522?
Mr. Chairman.
You recognize Mr. Lambert?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a ranking member of the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee, I've consistently worked to strengthen VA's automobile allowance, which helps veterans with severe service-connected disabilities purchase accessible automobiles. Earlier this year, the President signed into law my Veterans Auto and Education Improvement Act, which allows a veteran to receive multiple automobile allowances over his or her lifetime, but there's still more work to do. Currently, many eligible veterans living in areas like the territories are not able to use this benefit because they have to pay out of pocket for the cost of shipping the vehicle, which can amount to thousands of dollars. Simply unfair to these veterans who've earned this benefit by sustaining life-changing injuries and illnesses through their service. I'm pleased to be a co-sponsor of the Deliver for Veterans Act, which will right this wrong by allowing VA to pay for the cost of shipping a vehicle. I urge my colleagues to support this bill so we can make the automobile allowance more practical for veterans living in remote areas. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yield back. Anyone else seeking recognition? Mr. Self, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to make some general comments. This markup that we are addressing today is $184 million with at least one bill that's not been scored. I understand that some of the cost is mandatory, some is discretionary. I want to talk about the offset. The offset is only an offset in the CBO language. Veterans are paying for the additional cost in these bills through the home loan fee. It is actually revenue generating, and it adds to the federal budget. Again, CBO scoring is the only way that you even call this an offset. Veterans are paying for these bills. We are now $33.7 trillion in debt, and we're going to have to find a way to slow that down. Frankly, folks, every discretionary dollar that we spend this year, every discretionary dollar that we spend this year is either borrowed or printed. Every discretionary dollar. Frankly, politics is nothing but trade-offs. So if these are noble programs, trade-offs mean that we will find an offset in some less noble program in the VA to offset it. That would be a true offset. But we're not doing that. Mr. Chairman, out of respect for you and the work for this committee, I am not going to ask for a recorded vote on any of these bills, but I do ask the committee and the VSOs to work with me so that we can hopefully find some true offsets for the future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield
thank
back.
Mr. Duff. I commit that we will work together as staff to try to find those. Quite often, we need to understand that we also have a problem with CBO, though, when the way they rate some of these. If you find, quite often, if we reduce a program or take a program out that has been unsuccessful, it doesn't show up on the CBO score, which just seems really strange. So I will work with you and all the other members of the committee to try to find those offsets that we need. I agree with you on your statement. And I appreciate the fact that your statement will be in the record, and then we'll continue to work together on them. Thank you. Are there any other members with amendments or wish to speak?
Mr. Chairman, I'll note the ranking member stepped out briefly for another hearing. He'll be back. I just note for the committee he is supportive of this measure.
Thank you. Are there any other amendments in this nature of substitute for H.R. 522? The question now occurs on agreeing to the Bost Amendment in the nature of a substitute on H.R. 522. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it as amended. The nature of the substitute is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I now ask the acting ranking member to make a motion.
Mr. Chairman, move that H.R. 522 as amended be reported favorably to the House.
The question is favorably reporting the bill to H.R. 522 as amended to the full House. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to, and H.R. 522 as amended is reported favorably to the House floor without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2, give notice of intent to file minority, supplemental, additional, or dissenting views on H.R. 522 as amended.
so noted. I now call up H.R. 3738 and to amend Title 38, United States Code, to establish in the Department of Veteran Affairs the Veterans Economic Opportunity Transition Administration and for other purposes. I now call up H.R. 3788. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R. 3738, to amend Title 38 United States Code.
The text was circulated in advance and pursuant to committee rules without objection. The first reading is dispensed with. The bill is now open for amendment at any point. I now recognize myself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk shall report the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Amendment in the nature of
I
a
ask
substitute.
unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment in the nature of a substitute will be dispensed with. I ask it considered base text for the purpose of this markup, and without objection, so ordered. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes to speak in support of the amendment in the nature of a substitute. H.R. 3738 would establish a new administration called the Veteran Economic Opportunity and Transition Administration, within the Department of Veterans Affairs. This bill, as amended, would provide additional support and attention to missions and programs in the VA that further the economic opportunities for our veterans, including vocational rehabilitation, employment programs, education assistance, TAP, and home loan programs. This bill would reduce bureaucracy, increase specializations, and provide badly needed accountability within the VBA. For years, the VBA has been overburdened with compensation, pension, and education. This bill would create an additional undersecretary to specifically handle employment and education issues. I'm fully supportive of creating this position because we must ensure that VA has the resources they need to help veterans find economic opportunity after they leave the military. The ranking member and I have sent numerous oversight letters to VA about critical issues with due dates that are intended to benefit the veterans and fix problems. When VBA returns them over a month late, they are doing a disservice to the veterans that use the VA. Creating this additional office within the VA to handle veterans, education, and employment issues would allow for better services for our veterans and improve oversight for Congress. H.R. 3738 is also in line with my personal priority to improve transition assistance program. This bill would help us do exactly that and has been introduced for several Congresses by improving veterans' experiences when using their earned benefits. Now, I thank the VFW, the SVA, and the DAV for supporting this bill. I also would like to thank Dr. Winstrup for introducing the bill and my colleagues across the aisle for their bipartisan support of this bill. Do any other members wish to comment on the amendment in the nature of a substitute for H.R. 3738?
Mr. Chairman, of note, the ranking member supports your amendment in the nature of a substitute to create a fourth administration of VA. Benefits such as GI Bill and housing have for too long fought for attention to the VA. So the ranking member and I support the effort and the underlying bill, and yield back.
Are there any other members seeking any other amendments to the nature of the substitute to H.R. 3738?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to speak to the bill itself.
Wonderful.
And the ANS. Wanted to thank you for including the VET-OP Act in today's markup. I was proud to introduce this bipartisan, bicameral bill with my friend from Ohio, Mr. Wenstrup. One of my top priorities is ensuring that veterans are receiving their earned benefits as efficiently as possible. Unfortunately, that's not happening under the current organizational structure at VA. Many veterans find it difficult to utilize crucial education, employment, housing, and transition assistance resources because of bureaucratic red tape. These programs are currently housed under the Veterans Benefits Administration, where they have to compete with disability compensation and pension programs for attention. Economic opportunity-related business lines need a dedicated advocate at the undersecretary level. And this bipartisan bill will create that structure by establishing an Economic Opportunity and Transition Administration at VA. This change will allow us to deliver economic resources to veterans more effectively and bring more oversight and accountability to these programs. We have a responsibility to provide America's service members with the best possible resources and opportunities as they transition back to civilian life, and this bill is a big step towards meeting that responsibility. I thank my friend Representative Wenstrup for his partnership on the VET-OP Act and urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I yield back.
Does anyone else seek recognition? Seeing none. Are there any amendments to the amendment in the nature of substitute for H.R. 3738? Hearing none, the question now occurs on agreeing to the Boston Amendment in the nature of substitute to H.R. 3738. All those in favor say aye. 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 All those opposed, no. Depending on the chair, the ayes have it, and the Boston Amendment in the nature of a substitute is agreed to. Now, without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now recognize the ranking, now recognize Mr. DeLuzio for any comment he may have.
Mr. Chairman, move that H.R. 3738 as amended be reported favorably to the House.
The question is on favorably reporting the bill H.R. 3738 as amended to the full House. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Independent chair, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to, and H.R. 3738 as amended is reported favorably to the House. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. DeLuzio.
Pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2, I give notice of intent to file minority, supplemental, additional, or dissenting views in H.R. 3738 as amended.
So noted. I now call up H.R. 5914, the amended Title 38, United States Code to improve the process to approve programs of education for purposes of educational assistance programs of the Department of Veterans Affairs and for other purposes. I now call up H.R. 5914. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R.
The
5914.
text was circulated in advance and pursuant to committee rules without objection. The first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is now open for amendments at any point. Does any member wish to offer an amendment? Representative Van Orten.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
Let me get through this. I recognize Representative Van Orten to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. So, the clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 5914, offered by Mr. Van Orden of Wisconsin. This act may be cited as the Veterans Education Transparency and Training.
I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment in the nature of substitute is dispensed with, and I ask that the consideration based this be considered as base text for the purpose of the markup. Without objection, so ordered. Representative Van Orten is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment in the nature of a substitute would make technical changes to my bill, H.R. 5914, the Veterans Education Transparency and Training Act. This amendment in the nature of substitute would revise the section in the bill that would require schools to provide estimated tuition costs to potential GI Bill students to the best of their ability. Instead, in the case where a school cannot accurately estimate tuition, they'll provide an explanation of why the information will not be accurate. May not be accurate. This will increase transparency and ensure that the school is not giving the student faulty information that might put them in debt in the future. This bill will also provide will require the VA to establish an online hub that continuously updates to show the training available for school certifying officials, or SCOs. I believe this change will provide veterans clear information on their education benefits and allow the schools to stay up to date on the resources available through the VA. This amendment in the nature of the substitute also includes a bill that was subject of bipartisan negotiations, H.R. 2830. This provision will allow trucking schools that have a proven track record of success for veterans to establish another branch campus that will be able to accept veterans enrollment sooner than is allowed under the current law. In a time where the government is filled with bureaucratic red tape, I am happy to see some of this cut back in terms of veterans getting an education. H.R. 5914, as amended, is the result of bipartisan negotiations through my subcommittee in the last few months, and I thank Ranking Member Levin for that. I am pleased to see the revisions offered by the Department of Veterans Affairs that's supported by the minority, including H.R. 5914 as amended today, and I urge all of the members to support H.R. 5914 as amended, and I yield back, sir.
I thank Representative Van Orten for this amendment and the nature of a substitute. And I support these changes, and what I understand are the result of a bipartisan negotiations. Does any other member wish to comment on the amendment in the nature of a substitute on H.R. 5914?
Mr. Chairman.
Louisiana.
Note the ranking member supports Mr. Van Orden's amendment in the nature of a substitute. The Isaacson Road Benefits and Education Law, authored by Mr. Levin, was a landmark improvement for student veteran education benefits and builds on this committee's work from last Congress. And so the ranking member will be supporting the amendment in the nature of a substitute in the underlying bill. Yield back.
Any other members seek recognition on discuss this amendment? Are there any amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 5914? Hearing none, the question now occurs on agreeing to the amendment in the nature of a substitute on H.R. 5914. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is in nature substitute is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now recognize the acting ranking member, Mr. Luzio, for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that H.R. 5914 as amended be reported favorably to the House.
The question is on favorably reporting the bill H.R. 5914 as amended to the full House. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to, and H.R. 5914 as amended is reported favorably to the House. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2, give notice of intent to file minority supplemental, additional, or dissenting views on H.R. 5914 as amended.
So noted. H.R. 3722, the Daniel J. Harvey Jr. and Adam Lambert Improving Service Members Transition to Reduce Veteran Suicide Act. I now call up H.R. 3722, the Daniel J. Harvey Jr. and Adam Lambert improving service member transition to reduce Veterans Suicide Act as amended. The clerk shall report.
HR 3722.
The bill was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules without objection. The first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is open to amendments at any point. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes to support in support of the bill. I thank the Representative Nunn for looking for thoughtful solutions to address the tragic epidemic. I know this issue is very important to him, the bill, as it is to all of us. This bill is named in honor of a veteran in his district who took his own life, Adam Lambert. I had a chance to speak with Adam's parents during the teletown hall with Representative Nunn, and I know that they share Representative Nunn and my desire to help with other veterans, or help other veterans deal with when they're feeling stress. Now, I hope that our consideration of this legislation helps prevent other families from experiencing the same loss as the Lambert family. VA recently issued its annual report on veteran suicide, and I was disappointed to learn that between 2020 and 2021, veteran suicides increased 11.6%. I know firsthand that the year after the transition out of the military can be one that of the hardest times in a service member's life. The members of this committee understand it better than anyone else on the Hill how vitally important it is to do everything we can to prevent veteran suicide. Now that starts with breaking down the stigma around mental health for service members and veterans and continuing to expand access to their care. HR 3722 would do both by enhancing the Transition Assistance Program and the Solid Start Program by increasing awareness of the risk factors for suicide during that transition and reaching out to veterans after transition about available mental health services, what all is available to them. Now, I encourage my colleagues to join me in support of this good bill. Does any other member wish to comment on the bill?
Mr. Chairman.
Ranking member.
Mr. Chairman, I support H.R. 3722 as amended. Ending veteran suicide has long been one of my primary goals for this committee, and I would dare say every member of the minority feels the same way. And improving access to resources during transition is one of the steps that we can take to achieve that goal. I support the amendment in the nature of a substitute and the underlying bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Ms. Kate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, my colleagues. I'm speaking today in support of the Daniel J. Harvey and Adam Lambert Improving Service Member Transition to Reduce Veteran Suicide Act, introduced by my good friend, Congressman Zach Nunn. No matter if you're a veteran or civilian, it's extremely important to have a reason to get up in the morning, and those of us who have served in the armed forces know exactly and are very mission-driven and understand that community of like-minded, mission-driven people being around them. I remember getting out of the military and how hard that transition is just for those of us who, we wake up every day, we have a life of service, we go to work, we want to get the job done. So going from that job, that military lifestyle, to being, for me, it was a stay-at-home mom, and I went from a world where people said, yes, ma'am, and did what I asked them to do, to a world where people kicked and screamed and rolled around the floor and asked for juice. And so, you know, it was such a lifestyle change, and just so hard, just mentally, to really balance that. And I can imagine every service member goes through that transition. So half of our battle in preventing veteran suicide and providing mental health resources is having the veteran understand what's available to them. And I know that so many veterans don't even know the resources that are out there. So any work we can do to educate our veterans who are transitioning for what is at their disposal. We've done so much work on this committee and in Congress in general just to expand those resources. So we need to make sure that the people who need them the most know what's out there to them. So I couldn't be more supportive of this bill. I'm thankful for Congressman Nunn, and I look forward to supporting it going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to echo the support for H.R. 3722. This, as a fellow veteran and a physician, this was one of the first bills that I introduced as a new person in Congress. Very important that we address both PTSD, suicide, depression, and it's wonderful to have another fellow Iowa veteran improve this bill. So fully support Representative Nunn's bill that would improve the Daniel Harvey and Adam Lambert improving service member transition to reduce veteran suicide bill. Thank you. I yield back.
Does any other member wish to comment on the bill? No amendments were filed. Does any member wish to offer an amendment to H.R. 3722 as amended? So hearing none, the question now occurs on agreeing to H.R. 3722 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. I now recognize the ranking member for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that H.R. 3722 as amended be favorably reported to the House.
The question is on favorably reporting the House Bill H.R. 3722 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to, and H.R. 3722 as amended is reported favorably to the House. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Ranking member.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to Rule 11, excuse me, Clause 2, I give notice of intent to file minority supplemental additional or dissenting views on H.R. 3722 as amended.
So noted. H.R. 5938, the Veterans Exam Expansion Act of 2023. I now call up H.R. 5938, the Veterans Exam Expansion Act of 2023, as amended. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R.
The
5938.
bill was circulated in advance pursuant to the committee rules, and without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is open to amendments at any point. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes in support of the bill. I am in support of this bill because it expands access to disability exams for rural and underserved veterans. I know firsthand how difficult it is for rural America to gain access to specialty care providers in their own communities. H.R. 5938, as amended, would help veterans in rural communities have increased access to disability compensation exams performed by medical professionals with certain specialties. This is a vitally important, especially as more and more veterans are applying for VA benefits since the PACT Act became law. Does any member wish to comment on the bill? Ranking member?
Mr. Chairman, I thank Representative Siscomani for introducing this bill. Improving veterans' access to convenient, timely, and accurate compensation and pension exams is a goal we all support, and this bill will aid in those efforts. I also appreciate the representative's willingness to incorporate bipartisan feedback, particularly with the bill's reporting requirements. Excuse me, I just ran the length of all the way from here all the way to Rayburn. I support H.R. 5938 as amended, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Does anyone else seek to speak on the bill? Representative?
Mr. Chairman, I request to speak on the amendment. Thank you, Chairman Boss. I want to thank my colleague from Arizona, Rep. Siscomani, for introducing this bipartisan piece of legislation with me back on October 12th. In 2020, Congress allowed the Veteran Benefits Administration temporary authority to allow VBA contractors, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, audiologists, and psychologists the ability to conduct disability exam for veterans across state lines. By allowing VA contractors, medical providers to do this, more veterans will be able to quickly get the benefits they deserve and have earned, reducing barriers to the benefits nationwide. This legislation is supported by disabled American veterans and veterans of foreign wars, and I urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan effort. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. Does anyone else seek recognition? No amendments were filed. Does any member wish to offer an amendment to H.R. 5938 as amended? Hearing none, the question now occurs on agreeing to H.R. 5938 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. I now recognize the ranking member for a motion.
I move that H.R. 5938 as amended be reported favorably to the House.
The question is on favorably reporting the bill H.R. 5938 as amended. All those in favor say aye. 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 All those opposed, nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to, and H.R. 5938, as amended, is reported favorably to the House.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2, I give notice of intent to file minority supplemental, additional, or dissenting views on H.R. 5938 as amended.
So noted. H.R. 1753, the Jax Act. I now call up H.R. 1753, the Jax Act. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R.
The
1753.
text was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is now open for amendment at any point. I now recognize myself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk shall report the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Amendment in the nature
I ask
of...
unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment in the nature of a substitute be dispensed with. I ask that it be considered as the base text for the purposes of this markup. Now, without objection, so ordered. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes to speak in support of the amendment in the nature of substitute. My amendment would fully offset the cost of this bill. This important bill would increase access to disability compensation for female service members who served as members of the cultural support teams. Cultural support teams were comprised of female soldiers serving during the global war on terror. These roughly 310 female soldiers served in combat areas alongside male special operation teams before the Department of Defense lifted the ban on women serving in combat positions. This legislation would improve access to VA disability compensation for these female service members by requiring that the VA to recognize their combat service. This is a relaxed standard of proof in claims filed by the service members who engage in combat, and this legislation would allow that standard to apply to the claims filed by female cultural support team members as well. This legislation would also require VA to report to Congress on how many other female soldiers might have served in combat and aren't able to access their earned benefits. And this legislation would also require VA to provide information to Congress about the status of claims filed by female veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder or traumatic brain injuries. The Jax Act is important because it acknowledges the contribution and service sacrifices of our female cultural support team service members and rightfully would ensure that they can access the benefits they have earned. Now, I want to thank my friend and Representative Issa and the members of the committee for their work on this important issue. Do any members wish to comment on the amendment in the nature of substitute for H.R. 1753? Thank you, member.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1753 at the desk.
I now recognize Ranking Member Takano to offer the amendment in the nature of a substitute for H.R. 1753.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The clerk shall report.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1753.
As I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment is dispensed with and without objection so ordered. The ranking member is now recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me make one thing absolutely clear up front. I do support the Jax Act, and I'll be voting for its passage regardless of what happens to the amendment that I'm offering. And I encourage all of my colleagues to do the same. The women in cultural support teams, female engagement teams, lioness teams, or other similar units served at a time before women were legally authorized to be in ground combat. Early in their advent, these women were often not, not even provided proper training or protective equipment. And yet they volunteered to be embedded in infantry and other combat units, knowing full well the risks to life and limb they would face because they believed so strongly in the mission. Sadly, as is the cost of war, they suffered the very same wounds, both visible and invisible, as their male counterparts. And so it goes without saying that the women covered by this legislation are absolutely deserving of all the support we can muster for them, not the least of which are the VA benefits and health care their male peers enjoy. Because to not have their service recognized as combat is a disservice to them that we have a chance to remedy today. However, let me make one other thing absolutely clear. The bill we have before us today is woefully inadequate, and we should be embarrassed if this is the best that Congress can do. These women deserve better, and our failure to do better for them should weigh heavily on all of us. We know for a fact that a woman's service in these roles dates all the way back to the first Gulf War in 1990. We know for a fact that the growth of these units accelerated at the beginnings of Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom, long before the specific skill identifiers referenced in the bill were introduced. So the failure to include other servicewomen who we know are similarly situated is simply a policy choice by the majority to once again pinch pennies on the backs of our veterans. I will note that the majority included language in the bill that at subcommittee markup to require that DOD and VA collaborate to identify exactly the scope of the universe. All that is well and good, but then what, Mr. Chairman? When we receive the report, what happens then? Do these women have to come back to us, hat in hand once again, begging for the recognition so that we can sit here and judge whether or not they are worth the cost? That is simply unconscionable, especially when we can act now to help them. And if it is the majority's intent to pass further legislation to incorporate the larger cohort in the future, why wait? Why let these women suffer longer than necessary? So you can perpetuate the myth that the majority is the party of fiscal conservatism? Unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, this bill follows a familiar pattern of the majority trying to find the least amount of work they can do and the least amount they can spend while still claiming to have addressed the issue. It is the same movie we saw during the PACT Act consideration. Mr. Chairman, it is absolutely true that we don't know how many women served in roles similar to these during those listed in the bill since 1990. And it's also true that we don't know how much it will cost to deliver them care and benefits. But those data points are simply irrelevant to the conversation, or at least they should be. Because if we agree that these women are deserving, irrespective of the time frame during which they served, then we should deliver. And that is what my amendment does. It expands the bill to include veterans from each relevant era and expands the definition of covered service to include job functions that were substantively similar to those skill identifiers mentioned in the underlying bill. Mr. Chairman, we should not be in the position of picking winners and losers among these veterans because of artificial budget constraints. So I implore you and all the members of this committee to support my amendment to bring relief to these brave women who served with honor and dignity. And don't make them fight their own government for the care and benefits they have earned and deserve. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The ranking member yields back, and I thank the gentleman for his amendment. And I appreciate the ranking member's work on support of women veterans. Now, I agree that it's important to honor their service and ensure that they receive their benefits they earned. However, I am concerned that we do not have concrete data about the total number of veterans who would be affected by this amendment. We also do not have an estimate from CBO on the budget effects. To move forward without the score, we would be putting passage of the bill off the floor at risk, because if all of a sudden the score comes back different. For these reasons, I will not be supporting the amendment. Does any other member wish to comment on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman?
Representative Van Arten.
I would just like to say that I've worked with cultural engagement teams and cultural support teams in combat in both Operation Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom, and I was instrumental in bringing cultural support teams, the females, into Afghanistan initially, and then I worked with them in Iraq. And here's my concern, Mr. Ranking Member. These women, they're warriors. There's many of them that I'd prefer to serve with than some of my fellow Navy SEALs, to be honest with you, because of the courage that they showed under fire. We have to be very cautious, though, sir, to make sure that every dollar we do have is directed to those women that I stood with in combat. And without the ability to understand exactly who they are, I'm afraid that we're going to be squandering limited resources. I fully support the mission that these women have led. I've been proud to serve with them in some of the most harrowing circumstances, and I take them hand over fist over a bunch of folks. So I do appreciate the fact that you're submitting this amendment to try to make sure that all of the women that served in these roles are rewarded. We just need to make sure that we understand exactly who they are, so in fact we can honor their service. With that, I yield back.
Anyone else seek recognition? Seeing none, The question now occurs on agreeing to the Takano amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute of H.R. 1753. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr.
and the
Chairman, I request a quarter vote.
recorded vote has been requested. A recorded vote has been requested pursuant to committee rules. On the vote is, this vote will be postponed. Are there any further amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute? Hearing none, I now call up H.R. 5890. Okay, I now call up 5890, the review, 5890, the review Every Veterans Claim Act of 2023. I now call up H.R. 5890, the review Every Veterans Claim Act of 2023. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R. 5890, to amend Title
Text
30.
was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules without objection. The first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is now open for amendment at any point. I now recognize Representative Luttrell to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Sir, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk shall report the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute.
I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment in the nature of a substitute is dispensed with. I ask that it be considered the base text for the purposes of this markup, and without objection, so ordered. Representative Luttrell is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill would prevent VA from denying a veteran's claim solely because a veteran misses one VA exam. Veterans often pursue their VA claim for years, and none of them should be forced to start over just because they missed an exam. My amendment in the nature of a substitute would fully offset the cost of this bill. This amendment in the nature of a substitute also includes H.R. 5891. This section would require the VA Board of Veterans Appeals to notify veterans of the evidence the board did not consider when making a decision on a veteran's claim. It would also require a board judge to state in their decision which appeals form successfully started and appeal at which did not. These provisions are important because they would provide veterans with the information they need to choose how to continue their claim. And these provisions would ensure that the board is held accountable for when they incorrectly reject a veteran's appeal. Finally, this amendment in the nature of a substitute includes provisions from Representative Self's bill, H.R. 5870. These provisions would require the Board of Veterans' Appeals to publish on a website the dates of the cases that have been assigned to the board's judge each week. The board would be required to warn veterans that this does not mean the board will issue a decision on their case that same week. The provisions from Representative Self's bill are an important step towards VA transparency. This section would also provide veterans with information they need to choose which appeals options is best for them. I am pleased that these provisions of H.R. 5890 as amended has had bipartisan support and that revisions have been made based on feedback from Veterans Affairs. I urge all of my members to support H.R. 5890 as amended, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back, and I thank the Representative Luttrell for this amendment in the nature of a substitute, and I support these changes because they would fully offset the cost of this bill. This legislation would build on my efforts to improve the VA claims and appeals process under Veterans Appeals Improvement and Modernization Act of 2017. The AMA streamlined the appeals process and ensures veterans could choose how they wanted to pursue their claims for VA benefits. We're continuing to build on those efforts, and Representative Luttrell's amendment in the nature of a substitute will help us do exactly that, because it would ensure the veterans are provided for the information they needed to make the right choice for them when it comes to their claim. Veterans are entitled to decisions on their claims based on the evidence, and this bill would ensure that VA tells veterans all the information they need. Veterans are also entitled to know what evidence and what issues the VA Board of Veterans Appeals could not consider when making its decision on a veteran's appeal. This bill would promote VA transparency and would provide veterans with that information. Does any other member wish to comment on the amendment and the nature of a substitute on H.R. 5890? Mr. Ranking Member.
Mr. Chairman, I thank the Subcommittee Chairman Luttrell for offering two of the bills contained in this amendment in the nature of a substitute, and Representative Self the other. We all know that the disability claims process can be difficult to navigate, especially on appeal. So I appreciate and support the goals of this bill to help clarify and streamline that process. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Are there any other members seek recognition on the amendment? Are there any amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute on H.R. 5890? Hearing none, the question now occurs on the agreeing to the amendment in the nature of a substitute on H.R. 5890. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is in the nature of substitute is agreed to. And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I now recognize the ranking member Takano for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that H.R. 5890 as amended be reported favorably to the House.
The question is on favorably reporting the bill H.R. 5890 as amended to the full House. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to, and H.R. 5890 as amended is reported favorably to the House. And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Ranking member.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2, I give notice of intent to file minority supplemental, additional, or dissenting views on H.R. 5890 as amended.
So noted. H.R. 5785, the amendment Title 38, United States Code to modify the requirements of the Edith Nourse Rogers STEM Scholarship. I now call up H.R. 5785. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R. 5785, to amend Title 38
The
United
text was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is now open for amendments at any point. Okay, the gentlewoman from Illinois, Representative Brzezinski, is recognized for 5 minutes to speak on her amendment.
Thank you, Mr.
On the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Takano, for this opportunity. I'm grateful to see my bipartisan bill, the Edith Nourse Rogers STEM Scholarship Opportunity Act, being considered today in markup. My bill was would modify eligibility requirements for the Edith Nourse Rogers STEM Scholarship. This scholarship has proven crucial to getting more veterans involved in STEM fields, but current eligibility requirements have proven to be barriers for many of our student veterans, according to a 2022 GAO report. My bill would lower the minimum number of credit hours required and would allow student veterans to apply for the scholarship before their post-9/11 GI Bill benefits run out. These common sense changes will expand STEM education opportunities for our student vets. I want to thank Congresswoman Mace for her amendment to the ANS to require an annual report on demographic information to eligible vets denied for the scholarship. And I urge my colleagues to join me in advancing this important STEM expansion bill out of committee and onto the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Does anyone else seek recognition on the bill? Ranking member?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment in the nature of substitute to H.R. 5785 at the desk.
The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of substitute to H.R.
I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment in the nature of substitute is to be dispensed with. I ask that it be considered the base text for the purpose of this markup. Without objection, so ordered. Ranking member Takano is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment in the nature of substitute.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We all agree that more veterans should consider a career in STEM fields as they continue their education and they face unique barriers to success. Unfortunately, one of the main programs we have created to help these students, the Edith Nourse Rogers STEM Scholarship, is rejecting too many students due to overly constrictive eligibility standards that are not in line with Congress's original intent when we passed this bill. Our committee was briefed by the Government Accountability Office on a recent report that shows that 63% of applicants are denied access to the scholarships for a variety of reasons, most often due to arbitrary limits. Congress set on credit hours and remaining post-9/11 GI Bill eligibility, which results in the disqualification of applicants. Further, all funding for the scholarship is not fully exhausted every year. In short, we were overly restrictive when crafting the program and need to revisit the program requirements to help award all of the scholarship money we set aside for student veterans in STEM. Now, Representative Budinski's legislation does this by opening the scholarship up to more student veterans going through STEM educational programs. Her legislation will address the issues I mentioned and increase enrollment rates by bringing requirements for the scholarship in line with the realities student veterans face in credit hour requirements and the time frame during the school year that they apply for scholarships and loans. Now, this change will also help to expand the universe of educational STEM institutions, programs that students will consider by helping students plan for and afford programs that take longer to complete than the current 36 months of eligibility provided to students under the GI Bill. My amendment in the nature of a substitute adds a non-controversial pay-for to the legislation and prepares Representative Budinsky's legislation for swift floor consideration. I thank Representative Budinsky for bringing this proposal forward, and I thank Economic Opportunity Subcommittee Ranking Member Levin and Chairman Van Orden for their work moving the bill to full committee. I urge support and yield back the balance of my time.
I thank the ranking member for this amendment in the nature of a substitute. The Edith Nourse Rogers STEM Scholarship is an important VA program to get more veterans into high-earning careers. This program ensures that veterans who are out of eligibility for their education benefits still have a chance to pursue these degrees. I support these changes which improve the program and provide needed offsets. Does any other member wish to comment on the amendment in the nature of a substitute on H.R. 5785? See none. Are there any amendments to the amendment on the nature of a substitute? Are there any amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute for H.R. 5785? I recognize Representative Mace to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 5785.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment be dispensed with without objection, so ordered. Representative Mace is recognized for 5 minutes to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the ranking member as well. This amendment implements the Government Accountability Office's recommendation and requires the VA to report to this committee on the demographics of those veterans who are denied the Edith Nourse Rogers STEM Scholarship. H.R. 5785, this program is an important program which fills a gap in allowing student veterans to finish STEM degrees. Women are making gains and huge strides in STEM occupations, but they are still vastly underrepresented. The U.S. is not a leader in women in STEM fields. It's a crucial gap we need to fill in order to remain competitive in the economy, advancement of technology, and against our adversaries. Our office has worked closely with the Wounded Warrior Project to come up with real solutions based off the data they found so far in their massive Women Warriors report. The Edith Nourse Rogers STEM Scholarship has had an alarmingly low participation rate since its inception, raising concerns about barriers preventing beneficiaries from actually accessing the benefit. However, the VA does no analysis whatsoever for those who are denied the scholarship. So with that, this amendment will change this. Thank you to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, and I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back, and I support the gentlelady's amendment. It is essential that we continue to have oversight over this program. This amendment will ensure that we have additional data to inform our oversight. Does any other member wish to comment on the Mace amendment in the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 5785? Seeing none. The question now occurs on agreeing to the Mace amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute on H.R. 5785. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment in the nature of a substitute is agreed to. Now, without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Are there any further amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute on H.R. 5785? Hearing none. The question now occurs on the amendment in the nature of a substitute as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is agreed to. And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now recognize Ranking Member Takano for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that H.R. 5785 as amended be reported favorably to the House.
The question is on favorably reporting the bill H.R. 5785 as amended to the House to the full floor. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to, and H.R. 5785, as amended, is reported favorably to the House. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Representative Takano.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2, I give notice of intent to file minority supplemental, additional, or dissenting views on H.R. 5785 as amended.
So noted. H.R. 3790, the Justice for ALS Veterans Act of 2023. I now call up H.R. 3790, the Justice for ALS Veterans Act of 2023. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R. 3790.
Text was circulated in advance and pursuant to the committee rules without objection. The first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is now open for amendment at any point. I now recognize Representative Takano to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to offer
The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3790, offered by Mr.
I ask
Takano.
unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment in the nature of substitute be dispensed with. I ask that it be considered as the base text and the purpose of this markup without objection. So ordered. Representative Takano is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to offer this amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3790, the Justice for ALS Veterans Act, introduced by my good friend and former member of this committee, Representative Alyssa Slotkin. The ANS simply adds an offset to the cost of this important and much-needed legislation. ALS is a devastating disease, not just for those suffering from it, but for their families and caregivers as well. As such, any additional support we can provide to these veterans and ultimately their survivors is vital. So I encourage my colleagues to support this ANS and support the underlying bill as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I thank the ranking member for his amendment in the nature of a substitute, and I support these changes. Unfortunately, the evil of ALS typically results in the veteran passing away shortly after the diagnosis. As a result, under current law, surviving spouses of veterans with ALS are not eligible for increased dependency and indemnity compensation due to the short time frame. This bill would correct this injustice and allow those survivors' spouses to access the compensation they need after the loss of their veteran spouse to ALS. This bill would also require VA to report on any other conditions that have high mortality rates within a short period of time, like ALS does. This will ensure that we take care of our survivor community and that they have access to the benefits their veterans' loved ones have earned. I also support ranking member changes because they would fully offset the cost of this important bill. Does any other member wish to comment on the amendment in the nature of a substitute on H.R. 3790? Seeing none, are there any amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute for H.R. 3790? Hearing none, the question now occurs on agreeing to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3790. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The amendment in the nature of substitute is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now recognize Ranking Member Takano for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that H.R. 3790 as amended be reported favorably to the House.
The question is on favorably reporting Bill H.R. 3790 as amended to the full House. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. And the motion is agreed to, and H.R. 3790 as amended is reported favorably to the House, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Mr. Takano.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2, I give notice of intent to file minority supplemental, additional, or dissenting views on H.R. 3790 as amended.
So noted. H.R. 4016, the Veteran Fraud Reimbursement Act. I now call up H.R. 4016, the Veterans Fraud Reimbursement Act. The clerk shall report.
H.R.
The
4016.
bill was circulated in advance and pursuant to the committee rules without objection. The first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is open for amendment at any point. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes in support of the bill. I support this bill because it would improve accountability for VA's fiduciary program by requiring VA to promptly repay to the beneficiary all benefits that were misused by a fiduciary. This bill would remove VA's delays in repaying beneficiaries by reasons of pending VA negligence and determinations. This is a common sense fix to ensure the veterans whose earned benefits were misused by the fiduciary are promptly made whole. Does any other member wish to comment on the bill? Mr. Ranking Member?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief and simply say that I strongly support the bill and encourage my colleagues to do the same. Beneficiaries in the fiduciary program are among the most vulnerable in VA's care because they're often elderly or mentally ill, They are at greater risk for financial abuse and theft of benefits. That theft or misuse can have a devastating impact on their stability. As such, I support this bill's goal of speeding restitution to those beneficiaries who may have suffered from theft or misuse of funds by a fiduciary. I encourage my colleagues to support this bill as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Any other members wish to comment? Seeing none, does any member, no amendments were filed. Does any member wish to offer an amendment to H.R. 4016? Hearing none, the question now occurs on agreeing to H.R. 4016. All those in favor say aye. 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 All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. I now recognize the ranking member for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that H.R. 4016 be reported favorably to the House.
The question is on favorably reporting H.R. 4016. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion agreed to, H.R. 4016, is reported favorably to the House. Representative, or ranking member?
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to Rule 11, Clause 2, I give notice of intent to file minority, supplemental, additional, or dissenting views on H.R. 4016.
So noted. H.R. 4190, the Restoring Benefits to Defrauded Veterans Act. I now call up H.R. 4190, the Restoring Benefits to Defrauded Veterans Act as amended. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R. 4190.
This bill was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules, and without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is open to amendment at any point. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes in support of the bill. I support this bill because it would ensure no fiduciary can profit from misusing a veteran's funds. Right now, the law is unclear about who would receive the repayment from VA for misuse of funds when the veteran passes away before VA issues repayment. This bill would prohibit VA from making any repayment of a deceased veteran's misused benefits, deceased veterans' misused benefits to the fiduciary who committed the misuse. Does any other member wish to comment on the bill?
Mr. Chairman,
Ranking member.
I strongly support H.R. 4190 offered by my friend and former member of this committee, Representative Trone. The bill would correct an obvious gap in the law that prevents VA from making restitution to a beneficiary's estate if they should die before VA completes its investigation into the misuse of a veteran's benefit by a fiduciary. Given that beneficiaries in the fiduciary program are often financially vulnerable, fraud and misuse have an outsized impact on them and their estates. As such, giving VA the ability to reissue funds to a deceased beneficiary's estate will go a long way to providing financial stability to the veteran survivors. I encourage my colleagues to support this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. And does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? No amendments were filed. Does any member wish to offer an amendment to H.R. 4190 as amended? Hearing none, the question now occurs on agreeing to H.R. 4190 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. I now recognize Ranking Member Takano for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that H.R. 4190 as amended be reported favorably to the House.
The question is on favorably reporting House Bill, or favorably reporting Bill H.R. 4190 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. H.R. 4190 as amended is reported favorably to the House.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2, I give notice of intent to file minority, supplemental, additional, or dissenting views on H.R. 4190 as amended.
So noted. Postpone proceedings. The committee postponed further proceedings on the amendment offered by Ranking Member Takano to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1753. The question occurs on agreeing to the amendment. The clerk shall call the roll.
Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, no. Mr. Adewagen. Mr. Adewagen. Mr. Bergman. Mr. Bergman, no. Ms. Mace. Ms. Mace, no. Mr. Rosendale. Mr. Rosendale, no. Dr. Miller Meeks. Dr. Miller Meeks, no. Dr. Murphy. Dr. Murphy. Mr. Franklin. Mr. Franklin, no. Mr. Van Orden. Mr. Van Orden, no. Mr. Luttrell. Mr. Luttrell, no. Mr. Siscomani. Mr. Siscomani, no. Mr. Crane. Mr. Crane, no. Mr. Self. Mr. Self, no. Ms. Kiggins. Ms. Kiggins, no. Ranking Member Takano.
Aye.
Ranking Member Takano, aye. Ms. Brownlee. Ms. Brownlee, aye. Mr. Levin. Mr. Levin, aye. Mr. Pappas. Mr. Pappas, aye. Mr. Mervan. Mr. Mervan, aye. Ms. Sherfilis McCormick. Ms. Sherfilis McCormick, aye. Mr. DeLuzio. Mr. DeLuzio, aye. Mr. McGarvey. Mr. McGarvey, aye. Mr. Mears. Mr. Mears, aye. Mr. Landsman. Mr. Landsman, aye. Ms. Budzinski.
Aye.
Ms. Budzinski, aye. Mr. Adewagen.
No.
Mr. Adewagen, no. Dr. Murphy. Dr. Murphy.
Have all members voted first off? Anybody wish to change your vote? Clerk shall report the vote.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 11 ayes and 13 noes, and
Yep.
one not voting.
There are 11 ayes and 13 noes. The amendment is not agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The question now occurs on agreeing to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1753 offered by Chairman Bost. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is in the nature of a substitute, is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now recognize Representative Takano for a motion on reporting H.R. 1753 as amended.
Mr. Chairman, I move that H.R. 1753 as amended be reported favorably to the House.
All those in favor will say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to, and H.R. 1753, as amended, is reported favorably to the House. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2, I give notice of intent to file minority supplemental, additional, or dissenting views on H.R. 1753 as amended.
So noted. Does the ranking member wish to make a closing statement?
No, Mr. Chairman, we just simply thank you for this markup, and I'm glad we came together on so many bipartisan bills.
Thank you. That concludes today's markup. Summarizing today's votes, the committee has voted to report favorably 11 bills to the full House. H.R. 522 as amended, H.R. 3738 as amended, H.R. 5914 as amended, H.R. 3722 as amended, H.R. 5938 as amended, H.R. 1753 as amended, H.R. 5890 as amended, H.R. 5785 as amended, H.R. 3790 as amended, H.R. 4016 as and H.R. 4190 as amended. I ask in unanimous consent that agreement that the staff has authorized to make a technical, clerical, and conforming changes to the bill favorably reported today. Without objection, so ordered. I also ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to receive and extend their remarks and insert extenuous materials on any of the bills reported favorably today. Without objection, so ordered. I thank the members for their attendance today, and the Committee on Veterans Affairs is adjourned.